Hello and welcome to Experian Talks. And this episode, Experian Talks Numeracy Skills and Being Money Confident. And I'm very pleased actually to be joined by Ben Perkins. He's from National Numeracy. And Ben, we'll jump over to you in a moment. And the reason for this episode, and speaking to Ben at National Numeracy, is to understand that of course, there is a link between numeracy skills and money confidence and your financial behavior. And I guess understanding what can be very complex figures, agreements, contracts, rates, all of that. So Ben, you're going to kind of talk us through what you do at National Numeracy, what help and support there is, and also some of the things around National Numeracy Day, so on. So I'll jump over to you, Ben. I'll let you introduce yourself and just tell everyone who you are.
Hi, thanks, John, and thanks for having us on today.
Great.
So my name's Ben. I work for National Numeracy, and National Numeracy is a charity, and our aim is to help people of all ages to improve their number skills and confidence. My work here is mainly around working with adults who have low confidence in their numeracy skills to help them overcome anxieties that they might have, so they're able to engage with further numeracy learning.
Great, that's wonderful, Ben. Just as we talk about really what you do then at National Numeracy, so that bit about the confidence and the anxiety and so on. So, how do you approach that as an organization, as a charity, to help people improve their confidence or reduce their anxiety? I guess as a byproduct. So, how do you go about tackling that? And also, is it just around, I mean, I presume it's numeracy skills across the breadth of life rather than just financial numeracy?
Yeah, so we're all about numeracy skills that help us in our work and everyday life in some way. So in a sense, we're not about working with people on pure maths, things like algebra and trigonometry and the kind of things that might really have stressed us out at school.
Stressing me out now.
And you wouldn't be the only one to say that at all. But we're much more about those things that actually do help us in everyday life. So we look at things that are related to money management. So, for example, being able to understand a pay slip, being able to make a good decision about whether somewhere new to live is affordable or not, but also other things like if you're working in health and social care, for example, being able to understand medication, being able to, for everyone, being able to understand calorie information on food, weights and measures when they're cooking, and it comes into all sorts of parts of our life. But in terms of the confidence, we find that it's really, really important to address that first, because it becomes such a significant barrier to people engaging with maths that they decide to completely ignore it, and that can have real consequences, particularly around money management, actually, because if you think about if you're presented with a new council tax bill and you're really anxious about numbers and you find it really difficult and overwhelming to work with them, that bill will be covered in numbers in all sorts of different pieces of information. And our kind of natural human temptation, if we're stressed about that, is to stop looking at it.
I can imagine that. I think I think sometimes these things are as easy as we think, and just like you said, I mean, you threw out some those scary terms that we think about maths at the beginning. I mean, something I don't really, I wouldn't profess to be an expert in, but of course, I guess that's the scary bit that people think about, and they think about maths. I guess maths maybe as they learned in a classroom, quite abstract, and then they kind of think about it that way, and maybe that deters them from getting involved and learning a bit more about everyday maths and learning new things, I guess.
Absolutely, yeah, because I think as soon as you use a word like maths or numeracy, people conjure up images in their mind of that kind of like tearing their hair out over their maths homework or being told off by their teacher because they didn't know their times tables. And thinking about what X is when Y equals whatever else. And that really puts us off because it's our association with maths. But when we're working in everyday life, quite often it's the situations that we're working in that are complicated and difficult rather than the maths itself.
Absolutely.
So if you think, I always think about planning a journey. If you're catching a flight, it can become a really, really complicated situation where you've got to go at the airport at a certain time before the flight. You want to leave a bit extra to be safe. You've got the bag check-in time. You've got train timetables, how far it is from the train station. There's all this information, but actually the maths that can very often feel like is overwhelming us is quite simple. It's take off half an hour from this time and then take off another hour.
Yeah, I guess real world examples of kind of putting, maths or numeracy to work. But you actually made a good point now, which was just around, those terms like maths and numeracy. So what if someone said, what is numeracy? How would you explain it? I mean, is it just the same as maths? Is it real world maths that you would use? How would you define what numeracy is?
So I would say that it's a subsection of maths which has practical use to us in our everyday lives. So I gave you those examples of things that we'd call maths rather than numeracy. But when we think about numeracy, we're thinking about things like looking at your income and expenditure and being able to work out whether there's enough money coming in or whether you need to make some savings, or being in the supermarket and recognizing that this deal that looks really good is maybe not as good a deal as it does look. So it's those things that actually have an application to the way that we're using numbers in everyday life, and not just using numbers for the sake of using numbers is perhaps a good way to explain it.
That's a really good way to think of it. So my next question actually was around how do numeracy skills help personal finances? So, I mean, I guess you're setting the scene here for us, which is really the practical use of understanding the sums or the figures and knowing what that means. Because like we said, in the classroom, it's a bit abstract and you're maybe learning things that you wouldn't necessarily need. But I guess you put the emphasis on learning real things, the pay slips and the bills and so on. Is that kind of how you do things?
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about those real things. But I think it's important to acknowledge when we talk about numeracy in money management that it won't be the only thing that people need to get on with their money and to make their money go further. But it is one thing that we all will need because money is always presented as a number.
Yeah.
So when we think about those kind of real world things, it's as much about our confidence to make decisions with them as it is being able to do the calculation itself. So I gave the example earlier of picking a new place to live, and most people would be fairly comfortable with looking at the rent and thinking, is that more or less than I paid before? But if you're able to use numbers confidently, you can bring in, will the council tax be more here? Will I spend more or even less on commuting here? What are the total bills? Is this place furnished? So do I need to buy extra furniture? If you're not maths confident, that's very overwhelming because there's loads and loads of information coming into that.
Yeah.
But if you are, you can really make sure that decision is the right one for you and for your money.
So that's a really good point, I guess, which is around some of these big life decisions that we all have to make at some point. And you're using an example of, let's say it's moving house or a new job and, getting a new salary and benefits and so on, those kinds of things. But I guess it's really setting the scene of being confident with those numbers so that you can make good decisions or better decisions. And I guess you can understand the decision that you make.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's about that decision being the right one for you.
Yeah.
But what we see so often with people who are struggling with numeracy, regardless of whether they have the skill, it's actually just that confidence to actually sit down and work it out. Because as you can imagine, if you feel really anxious and you feel really uncomfortable, it makes that temptation to ignore our finances so much stronger because it's going to create a difficult feelings for us to try and do it. So really overcoming that anxiety is a really important first step. And quite often people find that they can do a lot more than they thought they could do once they've taken what feels like a very brave step to actually engage with their finances.
It kind of gets me thinking about, I guess, the kind of group of people that are perhaps in problem debt or have, money worries as well. And I guess they tend to avoid dealing with issues so much, because of course, why wouldn't they? Because it's quite scary, and letters and demands and so on coming through. And I guess that for those people, if any of those people as well struggle with numeracy skills, it's going to be far more difficult to just get on top of what's coming in, what's going out, what do I need to pay, how much am I paying, what's the interest on this agreement, and so on. So I guess that's kind of, that must be really difficult for those people. But we'll talk about it in a little while, but I guess you can kind of help people start that journey of getting on top of their finances, or their confidence anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to tell you a little bit of a story on that kind of thing where people are already in trouble and this makes it worse. I spoke to someone fairly recently who was trying to access support for their debts, and they phoned up the organisation which was offering them support, and the organisation asked for their annual income before they could help them. And for this person, not only were they maths anxious and uncomfortable with numeracy in general, they also were somebody who was working irregular shifts on a kind of 0-hour contract style situation. And actually it was quite complicated numeracy actually to work out exactly what that adds up to a year. And what happened to that person was that they couldn't work it out. They felt too embarrassed to say that they couldn't work it out and stopped accessing support, and their debt got worse and worse.
Yeah, that's quite a scary story, I think. And hopefully, for anyone who watches this video, I guess, as some kind of serving as an example, maybe not a warning because that's a strong word, but just the idea that, don't be too ashamed about saying that, you might not feel that confident about working out your money. I'm sure some of these organizations will help you go through that process if you tell them upfront about that. So let's talk about that, though. Let's talk about the anxiety bit, because I really want to kind of know about, maybe you can't really tell me, or maybe you can, but why do people feel anxious about, maths, or just have that low confidence? So is that just born out of maybe they didn't excel in maths at school, or maybe they never felt confident and it just wasn't nurtured and they just didn't understand the practical implications of it? If you could explain maybe a little bit more about that, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's loads of really understandable reasons why people might come to a place as an adult where they feel that they have low confidence. And the thing that ties all of the reasons together is that none of them are about any kind of natural ability or any kind of maths gene that exists that makes some people better than others. Quite often it is a childhood experience with school. Right. So it might be a particularly difficult experience, particularly for people who went to school much earlier. There were some really difficult experiences with maths teachers, and some quite harrowing stories about the way that people were treated, and people kind of go back to that place. But there's also, again, that association with complex maths that we did at school, and that association with feeling like we need to get things right the first time, we need to be really quick. It's almost like a competition, which is how maths can feel for a lot of people in school, and develop this idea that we should worry about looking stupid and we should worry about mistakes, rather than the idea that we have with a lot of our other skills, where if we make mistakes, then we can learn from them and we can improve. Whereas with maths, people have, as a population, we've really strongly developed this attitude that some people are maths people, some are not. What you did at school is a measure of how good you are, and then it's static forever. And of course, no skills are like that.
No, not at all. I think that's a really good point. If I put myself in the shoes of your example, I was never great at maths at school. In fact, even now, I'm not particularly great at times tables, never really learned those particularly well. But, I guess I developed my skills around practical use of numbers, particularly around personal finance and credit scores and so on. But, these are skills that are learned over time. I didn't leave school knowing how to do that, and I developed it. I wasn't great at maths when I left school. I was okay, but I guess I developed it, which is the important thing for anyone who wants to sit in the shoes and say, okay, I'm not very good now. I don't feel confident now, but could I be confident? I guess absolutely you could.
Yeah, and I always liken it to learning to drive, because it's a really good example of something that none of us could do when we were at school, unless we're Lewis Hamilton. But we couldn't do it at school, and it really commonly makes people feel anxious the first time you get in a car. It feels really uncomfortable and it feels really difficult, but we all have those kind of expectations that it's going to be difficult. We expect to have to put the hours in to learn. And if we fail our driving test the first time, we accept that we can try again, and that's okay. And maths is exactly like that. We just see it differently.
Yeah, it does get me thinking as you kind of talk through these examples as well. You know, the bills and the income and so on. And I'm thinking about credit scores as well, because, you know, that obviously I work at Experian and I'm all about credit scores. And I just wonder, I mean, I suspect actually people who are not very confident with numbers and not very confident with personal finances, because of course then they don't have that confidence in numeracy skills or math skills. They might feel a bit overwhelmed, I think, you know, when they come to check their credit score, and what does that credit score mean? And what are all the numbers on your credit report? Because it's full of numbers about zeros if you're up to date, ones if you're a month late, and, you know, how much is your outstanding balance and so on. So it does get me thinking about that. Now, you know, I'll probably say this to anyone who watches and actually does feel themselves in that situation where they feel very nervous or anxious about checking their credit score because of that. So there's two things. Firstly, it never reduces your credit score to check your credit score. So by all means, do that at any point. And number two is we've got a great service team who can help you with any queries. So if at any point you check your credit report or credit score and you feel like you just don't get it, write down all your questions in an email or on the contact us form and send them through. We'll answer them all, by the way. So, you know, there's no judgment from anyone here. They're not easy to understand. So if you're in that situation, by all means, do that. But Ben, let's talk about actually, I guess the important part, we'll kind of set the scene for just being a bit anxious or just being a bit worried about your number skills. So what can people do to start kind of trying to overcome that and just feeling a bit more confident? Do you help them through that journey, or are there certain things you just tell people to do, kind of go away and look at this and look at this and try doing this? Is there a kind of route to get more confident?
In a sense, yes, but also we're all different, and we all experience that anxiety differently. But to put just a couple of brief tips that I would encourage people to think about if they are overwhelmed. Firstly, I'd say to focus only on the information that you actually need to help you solve your problem. Sometimes actually practically isolating that and writing it on a different piece of paper and putting aside the very complicated bill can make it a less overwhelming task. There's a huge thing about reducing the pressure we put on ourselves, both in terms of expecting ourselves to do things really quickly, because actually to manage your finances, giving yourself time and getting it right is much better than putting ourselves under pressure. But also social pressure. I know a lot of people have this fear of looking stupid. So if you're working through your personal finances, do that in your own space, only around people who you're comfortable with, or no one at all, and go and ask people for help if you need it. Use calculators if you need it, because actually in the real world, it's not a test. You don't get points for the way that you've worked it out, or because you haven't used a calculator, or because you've done it the special way that they teach in schools these days. It's actually about making it comfortable for you. And lastly, I'd just give a kind of overall tip on being a bit more gentle and empathetic on ourselves, because that anxiety we get is usually coming from self-judgment. If I get it wrong, I'll be looking stupid, or other people are much better at this than me. But actually, if we think more about mistakes being learning opportunities, we think about not comparing ourselves to others and how they're doing, we can really see our confidence grow. And then when our confidence grows, we can start to address the skills, which we can provide resources for, which I think we're going to come on to talk about.
Yeah, I think this is, I'm finding this really exciting talking about this. You know, some of the things you're laying out are really around the self-judgment and the fact that it's not a race, because of course it's not a race. And I think about just, you know, you're telling me these stories, but I'm putting myself in the shoes of people who do this. And, you know, even me doing my personal finances takes a long time to go through. just going through, what's owed on this, what do I pay out for my gas and my electric, and when do I need to switch, and so it takes ages. So I guess you're absolutely right. Don't ever think of this as a race to do it, see how fast you can do it, because you're right, it's not school, it's not a test. You're not timed to 90 minutes to come up with a final correct answer and work it out the right way. So yeah, I mean, really interesting points actually that I'm learning.
Yeah. And if it takes you forever, or what feels like forever, just remember that's not because you're bad at it, or that everyone else is kind of magically finding it easier to manage their finances than you are. It's just because it does. So don't take the fact that you're finding things difficult as a message that you're not good at a thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's jump on actually and talk about the National Numeracy Challenge. So I mean, some people will know about this, some people won't. So probably good to just kind of explain what this is and what it does.
The National Numeracy Challenge is our free online learning resource, which we provide at National Numeracy, and anyone can access that at nnchallenge.org.uk. And what we're looking to provide with it is a really low pressure way for people who do have either low confidence or low skills in their numeracy to be able to check up on where they are and get access to learning resources that can really, really help. And we focus this entire resource in situations that will occur in everyday life. So there'll be questions like the sofa is 25% off, how much are you saving? There'll be questions like the bill totals this amount, how much has that changed from last year? So it's all about practical numeracy that we can really apply to our everyday lives rather than maths, but done in a way that's really, really low pressure. We don't treat it as a test, we treat it as a way to find you the resources that suit you the best. And we encourage people to use it in a really bite-sized, flexible way so that you don't have to sit down and do it as you would if you did a maths course at a local college. You can just dip in and out and do what suits you.
So there's no square roots and obtuse angles and so on in here.
No.
I like that though. It's good. I guess again, really emphasizing that kind of, I mean, the breadth, by the way, of finances and personal finances and working out what the bill is or the discount is on something, which just like you said, it could be the supermarket, could be a sofa. It just highlights the importance of getting a bit confident. So if someone wants to do this, they just go onto your site, just like you said. They do this and it's quite just practical. It's just a way of working through as they want to go through. And then at the end of this, they can get some resources that can help them if they need to just improve or just develop some of their skills in a couple of areas. Is that kind of, it just kind of gives you some really good stuff to work with?
Yeah, so what it will do is it will identify roughly where you're working at, and it will identify your weaknesses based on the questions that you got wrong, and it will match you with learning resources that can support you. So if you answered a question about percentages wrong, we will provide the resources that break down how to work out that question, but also teach you a little bit more about percentages and the background skills to answer the question.
Okay, that's great. And I guess, again, putting myself in the shoes of someone who was going to do this, I may not be feeling confident right now, but don't let that put me off doing the test, because the test, no one's judging you on the test, are they? It's just going to try and help you understand where maybe you could improve and just build your skill level a little bit. We're not marking you, and we're not going to, punish you for, getting low marks or not getting something right. It's just about learning and developing a bit of confidence, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And I'd encourage people to just try not to see it as a test when you give it a go. See it as finding out information about you, and it will help you to address those weaknesses. And I encourage people to be really honest with the system as well. So if there's a question that you don't know, you can press I don't know, because essentially what you're saying is, hello there, National Numeracy people, I'd like a resource on this, please. And because it's not a test, your score doesn't actually matter.
Oh, super. That's good to know. So I think probably good for anyone who's thinking about doing it is just give it a go. And if there are stuff that you think you don't know, put you don't know, and then you'll help kind of start that process of learning a little bit more. So we know about what happens after the challenge now. So thinking about as well, when this video comes out, actually, but mid-May, something called National Numeracy Day. So what's the purpose of National Numeracy Day? Is it kind of a highlight, some of the issues, help people, do the challenge and so on? If you want to tell us a little bit about what that is.
Yeah, I think it's two purposes really. One, to raise awareness of how important numeracy is in our lives, and to start some of the conversations like we've been having today, and help people realize that by improving their numeracy, they can make really significant changes to their lives, including with their money. But it's also about giving people the opportunity to start their journey to improve numeracy, to start to rethink their relationship with maths.
I guess that's the really important part, which is there's probably a lot of people who will struggle to, just because of pure confidence, and not because necessarily of skill or learning the skill to do it, but kind of sat at home just anxious about bills that are coming through, or their payslip that's coming through, or their council tax bill, like you said, even just shopping, I guess. But what we're saying is the important bit is taking the step to just start learning those skills, start developing, and just start feeling a little bit more confident in how you use numbers, which practically have such a huge benefit on our kind of financial lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got lots of resources out there for National Numeracy Day across three kind of themes that we're running, which is supporting your children with their numeracy, managing your money, or numeracy at work. And people can visit our website and find those hubs of resources and start to think about their relationship with maths and start to work on improving. But we've also got lots and lots of really exciting live events that people can find out more about. And there's lots more information on the website as well. Activities for children to get involved in from celebrity ambassadors like Cassia Jones from Strictly, and Peter Sawkins, the winner of the Bake Off, both doing activities about maths in their jobs. And we'll be all over social media as well, so people can join that conversation about why maths matters to them and spread the word about improving numeracy.
Wonderful. Actually, we'll link as well in the description to the video your website for the challenge and the resources as well. But you raised actually a really interesting point there about kids, and it got me thinking. There could be a kind of a group of people who aren't confident with numbers, particularly around personal finances and so on, and they're worried about their kids and their kids developing the right skills to be confident and so on. So the resources that you have on your website, can that help with that kind of process? Is there anything you would tell people in that scenario? I mean, I guess to actually go on the journey together, probably, family journey to get a bit more confident, but your website will probably help people with resources.
Yeah, the best place for resources to go is to familymathstoolkit.org.uk, which is another of our websites. But in terms of what I do, quite a lot of work with parents and supporting them to bring maths positively into the home. Our three top tips really are to point out maths in the real world, where you see it out and about, whether that's in the shops, for younger kids, whether that's simply the numbers on the front of the bus. To be positive about maths, to avoid saying I can't do maths, I hated maths at school, and to talk to children in terms of effort rather than talent, and really get across that message that hard work is what will help them achieve it in maths at school, rather than the idea that some people are talented and some people aren't, and some people will never get it.
I think it's really interesting, and I'm thinking back to my school days. When we're talking about hard work, or that kind of skill, and the setting of maths, and I guess it really puts the onus on, just like you said, the people who can do it the quickest and the fastest and get it right the first time, are those who excel. And then obviously at some point you just move on and you do the next thing, and you might not have caught up by that point, and you might not have learned the thing that you need to learn. And I guess that's where some kind of spiral can start. So it's really interesting, because when you talk about some of the things around taking your time to work out these things, get the numbers that only matter to you and write them on another sheet of paper. It's just I guess you're reinforcing a point here, which is just take your time, take it slow. It's not a race. You're not judged. Just do it in your time to start learning the right things that you want to learn and need to learn.
Yeah, if I had £1 for every adult who had told me that they're bad at maths and they know it because they were in the bottom set at school. And that's the reason, I'd be a very, very wealthy man. And the thing with the reason I come back to that point about setting is because it's that message again that adults hold on to. But like we talked about with other skills, there's no reason to believe that skill set is fixed, or that ability is fixed, and we can improve on all these things all the time. It just may have been a reflection of perhaps that teacher's way of teaching it wasn't right for you, or that particular area was difficult.
Yeah, of course, that gets me thinking, like we talked about with, I mean, particularly as we look at this from a personal finance perspective, looking at your credit score. And I guess, I mean, for someone who's nervous about it, would be worried about checking their credit report, but the skill of learning it, whether that's asking us lots of questions at Experian or any of the credit reference agencies, or getting your help videos online, or, guides online, once you learn it, you will have learned it, and you'll then understand how the credit report works. So I guess you're absolutely right. It's just taking the time to go through it and learning the bits that you need to learn. And once you do that, that's the skill that you need, rather than worrying about, everything else. It's really, I mean, I'm finding it quite fascinating, because I'm thinking about, but not just, but I mean, I think about my math skills, because I said, I was never great at maths, but I've learned the skills that I need to do the things that I need to do, which I guess is the important thing you're emphasizing.
Yeah, and I think, if you don't mind me just pointing out, you're talking about your math skills in a way that a lot of adults and a lot of people watching will do as well, in saying that I don't think I'm that good at maths, but also you have this really good understanding of quite complicated credit scores and financial issues, which you've learned, and that is maths.
Yeah. I guess, yeah, well, I mean, you're right. I mean, it's probably the way, just like you set out at the beginning, actually, which is, probably the classroom maths versus practical maths, which is still maths, but we don't think of it as maths, I suppose.
Absolutely. And the reason that I'm making that point is because there will be people watching who have low confidence, who feel exactly the same way. And if you can find something in your life that you do that is clearly maths, that can boost confidence. I do lots of work with NHS staff, healthcare support workers, who talk to me about the fact that they can't do maths and it's impossible for them, but they understand all the patient's data. They're able to put the news scores in the charts. They're able to work with schedules. And when they realize that, actually, it's like, oh, I can do some maths. It's just the same skill in a different context.
Yeah, I think that's I think probably the really good point to kind of wrap us up here, which is that we use maths so regularly on a daily basis, particularly around money and finances and so on, but we probably don't always think about it. So whilst we might be anxious or not very confident with maths, we're probably doing stuff that is maths, and we're kind of not linking them up together. But that's really great. And Ben, you've really walked us through some excellent stuff, and I'm really excited about this, actually. And we'll link in, by the way, for anyone who wants to do the National Numeracy Challenge, we'll link in there so you can kind of go and do that and see how you come out. And we'll link to your guides and your resources online as well. But Ben, from us, I think, from me, I want to say thank you, because I think that was enlightening to understand some of the journeys that people go on with their numeracy skills and numbers and so on, particularly the impact in finances. So thank you for joining us. I think that's been really exciting to have you on.
Yeah, thank you for having me on, to you and for everyone at Experian for your support for National Numeracy Day as well.
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks, Ben. That's great. Thank you.